Well, it's been nearly 4 years since we actually made an episode of this, and we've tried a lot. We've tried maybe 4 or 5 times. I could just never really motivate myself to push through and follow through on it after I'd broken that habit. But it's just me right now, and Jared is, I think eventually we'll probably do this together again, but there's other priorities in life. And I've been wanting to do this for a while, and I've just been telling myself I couldn't because I would have to do it alone. And that's just an excuse. So here we are. It has been so long, in fact, that I feel like a completely different human being entirely. I find it fascinating. That's what today is. Like, that's what this topic today is going to be, is this concept of growing and really the misconceptions that I had with it for so long, and probably still have some that are unidentified. I think looking back, I find it difficult to actually listen to myself and my opinions that I once held back when I was 20, I think. Yeah. Started it when we were 20. I was 21 by the time we stopped, thinking that I had reached some level of like enlightenment, this concept of just assuming that everything you know right now is everything you'll need to know, and really settling in on that and becoming complacent with all aspects of life. And especially in retrospect and looking back, it's that mindset in particular has been the cause for, it's been the catalyst for so much of my growth since then, really, because I find myself, or I have found myself in this cycle of pushing myself to grow during intense change. And then once I'm no longer stressed, that must mean I made it and I'm done growing or whatever. And having that kind of overconfidence in the peace, which then inevitably results in the downswing again, and reflecting back and thinking about all the things that need to change going forward. And maybe that's just the natural cycle of it. It could be. But this most recent time has made me realize that it's a very destructive form of growth to do it all at once every couple years, instead of being mindful in the moment and just always seeking to grow incrementally as you learn more, and actually pushing yourself to implement that change as it arises rather than waiting for the change to be forced upon you. Because doing it in those big downswings can really do a lot of damage. I've experienced, and they can sometimes cause regression. And if you don't have the strength to really push through it, you will regress. But I mean, best case, you regress a little bit and you almost have to start over and push back through because you lost progress. So I guess that's kind of the setup here, is really like evaluating what it means to grow and the challenges of growth and growing pains, as they say. And I just kind of want to reflect on it. I guess I'll start with that overconfidence that I was talking about. Through retrospective perspective, I guess, you can really sense a lot of the confidence and the pride and the ego of thinking that everything that you know up to that point is everything you will need to know going forward, and assuming that you're well equipped to handle whatever's next. And then you inevitably leave yourself with blind spots, and something goes through that blind spot, and lo and behold, you're completely unprepared. And the trick being to not let yourself get overconfident, and to not let yourself really base your foundation on ego. Because the moment you just tell yourself that you know what you're doing in all circumstances, then that's when you get shown that you don't. I think with life, the challenges are so unpredictable that we can just act like we're able to predict it and really go blind to ourselves. And when you cease to grow, yet time moves forward and life keeps changing, you're going to experience the same thing repeatedly. And that's kind of what the problem is. And I've felt, because I've always been so introspective and reflective on so many things, that I've hyper-focused on it. And it's been really difficult for me to really adapt to living presently. And if you can't live presently, then you can't really adapt at all, because you're trying to prepare based on only your past experiences and not what's happening right in front of you. And while reflecting on your past experiences is extremely valuable in shaping the way you take on future ones, I do think if that energy is allocated to the wrong things from your past, then you're actually setting yourself up to repeat it. And the hardest part about growth, and especially this go around, has been genuinely trying to accept the complete lack of control in life in general, and really giving yourself up to be, I guess, a student to your own experiences, past and present, and stop telling yourself that you know best all the time. And stop telling yourself that you've been through this before, so you know how it will be. And it's easier to reflect on past experiences, positive and negative, and be able to go through the process of acceptance and really like, oh, this bad thing happened to me in the past, but it's in the past now. I've moved on from it. But the harder part about this assessment is when you see something from your past and then you see that it's still there in your present, and it hasn't changed, and it's been happening for a long time, and meaning holding that this whole time. You've been enacting that, whatever it may be, carrying that with you for as long as you can reflect back on it, and really kind of viewing it in its objective sense that like, wow, that part of me that I don't like is still there, and I've done nothing about it. I've just let it grow. And coming to terms with that ugliness, if you will, like the dark side, or like the shadow side of your existence, like your person. And I think the immediate reaction is to reject and deny it. And whether that's through hiding it or ignoring it or excusing it or justifying it or whatever, I think that's right there is where the ego comes into play, because we're unwilling to admit that this is us. Whether that's saying that, oh, I used to do that, not anymore, even though you do, and you just don't want to admit it, or something that you're telling yourself, oh, that's not a big deal that I do that. Like, for example, like having an unhealthy habit. It's so common for us to just be like, yeah, I know it's unhealthy, but that's a problem for future me. Oh, yeah, that's unhealthy, but I haven't faced any consequences for it, so I don't really need to change it now. And then, I mean, obviously, you end up regretting that decision to with that lack of action, and to do nothing about it. And when you shift your mindset from this stifling growth through ego, and you really persist through the difficult stages of acceptance of your entire being, I think that's the only time where you're really going to feel that peace. And obviously peace isn't forever. Peace is something you have to practice. It's not something that you achieve, but it's knowing what that practice is that's important. And knowing yourself to an extent that you can call yourself out. You can tell yourself, stop doing that, you're lying to yourself. You know this is bad, why are you doing it? And that's a really, really difficult thing to do consistently in the areas that it needs to happen in. And for me, that's really what I struggled with. And still, even though I'm in the process of amending it, I've struggled with not only accepting the shadow side of me as me and not someone else. It is me. It is who I am. But also being genuine with myself and saying, like, that's not okay. You can't make excuses for it. And at least for me, among other areas of my life, it manifested a lot in health, like mental health, and really giving up control of my life to this part of me that I hated. And because it was easier to just let go of the wheel instead of take control of the wheel. And when you let go and that other part of you takes hold and starts driving, you're doing it because it's easy, but all the time that it's happening, you're just hating it. You don't like where that thing is steering you, yet you're letting it continue to steer you. And it was a pretty intense moment to come to that realization of, like, you can't just give up control like that. And you can't just coast. Funny enough, I've talked in the past on this podcast about direction and doing things with intention, but I was not really fully encompassing that idea. I was encompassing it where it was convenient and easy for me. I wasn't encompassing it where it was difficult and painful for me. And being intentionally the person you want to be, and not telling yourself, like, oh, I'll get there. I can keep doing what I want now. I'll get there eventually, you know? I don't know. The journey from then till where I am right now in this moment is fascinating, to really look at my younger self and see that in myself, but also see, like, still the foundations of who I am. And when you have to rebuild like this and grow, I think the first question pops into your mind is, like, who am I? What is it that I want? What is it that I'm doing? Like, why am I here doing this thing around these people? Like, what even do I like? What do I want truly? Like, what's the end goal? All of those questions just flood in. And it's really difficult and overwhelming to be faced with those questions and not to realize that you can't answer them right away. And that was kind of a big moment for me, like, being someone who is, I'm a pretty big people pleaser. I had to really reconcile with myself the parts of that I love about myself and the parts of it that I don't. And really siphoning out, like, do I actually enjoy doing things for people in this way, or am I doing it because of some other reason? And at least right now in the journey, it's some mix of both. I'm tired of pouring outside of myself and existing outside of myself and investing all my energy everywhere else except for me. And it's not that the reaction to that is not to just completely flip and go completely inward, because that's not the answer. But it's to reallocate and to truly like assess the problem and actually take action to resolve it. And when you pour so much of yourself and you live for so long outside of your own being, and you invest so much energy into everything around you, your entire existence is dependent on those things now. And I think that is natural and healthy in moderation, in the sense that, like, obviously you want to invest into things and you want to pour into things and you want to be selfless. Like, that's a good trait in my opinion. But to be so selfless that you lose the self part is dangerous and scary. And I don't have it figured out yet. But that's like the realization, I guess, is in order to be truly selfless, like you have to let go of that ego and that pride and that notion that you know everything you could know in that moment, and to always be willing to be open. And through that, you can make truly selfless decisions and be able to bear the weight that those decisions carry, because a selfless act is not free. A selfless act takes a toll. But if all you're doing are selfless acts, then you're giving up each piece of you progressively until there's nothing left. And when there's nothing left, that is a truly scary moment. To avoid that, you've got to pour those foundations in and really seek to know more about yourself, know the things that make you happy, know and reaffirm to yourself that, am I doing what makes me happy? Yes or no? And am I moving in the direction I want to go? Yes or no? And if I'm not, how do I get there? Or how do I diagnose what got me here and correct that? And it's all of these thoughts. And this process of growth is really exhausting over long periods of time, because it takes so much energy, especially depending on from your starting point. If you're rebuilding entirely, which I don't feel like I am, but if you're rebuilding entirely, it will be exhausting. And at some point you need respite. And even for me, like, I need some sort of balance to this process, which I'm still trying to figure out what that even means for me. I think the whole point of this ramble really is just sharing my experience and my revelations about how truly important it is to let go of yourself so that you can pour into yourself. I don't even think that makes sense as I say it, but let go of the ego and really have some self-actualization of, like, stop viewing yourself through the lens of what you want to be and view yourself through the lens of who you actually are, and then fill in the gap between those two visions of yourself. That's where I'm at right now. And it overcame me so much that I realized, well, I created this podcast. I haven't posted to it. I only posted to it for 6 months after creating it, and then abandoned it, and really just got lost along the way. And I'm realizing how important this kind of process was to me, especially because I'm a rambler. Being able to outlet and being able to speak and articulate what's inside is an important process to me. And it doesn't have to be to another person sitting right in front of me. It can just be into the void like this, and it still feels great. So I'm going to really try to continue this and really follow this inspiration. So anyways, I don't really remember what my outro for this was, but whoever's listening to this, I appreciate it and the time. And yeah, that's that.